Hi class, it's Christy. I am going to show you how to prepare images, raster images. Remember, raster images are pixel-oriented images, generally in Photoshop or some sort of photo editor. I'm going to show you how to prepare images that you may have created, borrowed, stolen, wherever you got them from, for placement for an InDesign document that is meant ultimately to be printed. This is very different from preparing images for locations such as the internet or some sort of interface design. This is primarily just how to prepare these images to be placed in an InDesign file that is ultimately meant to be printed. So I have open right now in Photoshop a good number of photos. You can see here all of these random file names, most of which are JPEGs. Good indicator that I've pretty much stolen all of these off of the internet. Now, when I found them on the internet, I did some careful Google image searching, but my goal was to try and find images that were large. So I did set my search tools for large images for many of these. And then I tossed in a few that I know are not going to be large enough, just for the sake of demonstrations, so that I could show you guys what the limitations are for images if they happen to be too small for you to use. So this is just one random image. Looks like it might be useful or kind of fun for me to use as a background texture or pattern or a fill texture for something like some really cool fat text. I don't know. Apparently I have a plan here right beside me as in the form of a rough draft or a rough sketch that I'm going to be trying to follow as I am creating for you in InDesign something that's meant to be printed like a newsletter. But first, before I can start building my newsletter and placing images into my newsletter, I need to make sure that these images have been properly prepared. Otherwise, I would be placing images in wrong color models, saved in the wrong file format, or in a resolution that's not suitable to be printed. So starting with this one, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of class, if you recall, in looking under the hood to see how large these images are and what color model they're in and what file format they're in, because chances are very high I'm going to have to change every single one of these in that regard because I stole them off the internet. So I'm going to go to Photoshop's image pull-down menu, and the first place I'm going to stop is this area here called Mode. Mode is going to tell me what color mode or color model this image is in. This image is in RGB, which is great for the internet, but is not great for a printing environment. So this image, if I were to save it, I have two options to save it properly for an environment to be printed. The most ideal, of course, if I want to keep it in color or full color as it is already, would be to change it to CMYK color mode. It's going to say, are you sure you want to do that? Yes, of course. You can see instantly as soon as I do that, the color kind of dulls a little bit, right? The reason why is because this image is in RGB, meant to be viewed on screen with light. And I know that when I go to print something that was designed or created to be shown on screen, printing it will significantly dull the colors as it's printed, meaning those colors that were dull or now dull were out of gamut for print. So I'm going to also show you that the other acceptable color model would be to save this in grayscale, which will save it in black and gray and white pixels, all of which, if they were to be printed, would be printed in grayscale. Using just one ink color, which is black. So saving this in grayscale color model is also an acceptable file format if you're preparing images that are ultimately going to be printed in CMYK. So now that this has changed to CMYK color, I'm going to go back to the image pull-down menu and select image size for this image, and you're going to see that as beautiful as this image looks on screen, there's going to be some limitations. For instance, right now, this image is only 7.5 by roughly 4.5 images, and this would be the largest size I could print it in. However, the resolution is too low for the print environment. I need the resolution of this image at a minimum to be 266 pixels per inch, or DPI, in order for it to be a high enough resolution for print. So a way to increase the resolution without reducing the image's quality or changing its size to resolution proportions would be to uncheck this resample button here, which will link the width, the height, and the resolution of this image together and allow me to increase the resolution to the minimum amount that it would need to be. Mind you, a lot of people just use 300 as a suitable resolution. That's fine too. I'm kind of trying to pick the lowest possible resolution for the print environment, which is 2 times the LPI of most printing devices. Most printing devices is 133 LPI, so a 266 DPI resolution would be the minimum resolution that this image should be in. Now, you'll notice as soon as I changed the resolution to 266, the width and the height of this image got even smaller, right? And that's so that I'm not affecting the quality of this image by increasing the resolution or adding pixels that did not previously exist to this image. So you'll see it limits my ability to use this image even more. If 4 by roughly 2.5 inches is the largest that I can use this image, I'm going to have to be really careful to only plan to use this image in the scenario where I can use it in its actual size or smaller. I cannot scale up raster, right? Raster imagery scaling 101. Rule number 1 is never scale up raster, because otherwise you're just making the pixels larger. You can, however, scale it down as much as you like, because then you're making the pixels smaller and undetectable. The goal is to not show anyone your pixels, so you don't want to scale anything up. the second biggest rule probably in scaling images for raster is to make sure you're always scaling proportionately. So you don't want to be squashing or stretching anything, no, not even a pixel. And you certainly don't want to be modifying or editing an image in a way where the pixels and the scaling is evident. So do those in a way that's undetectable. All right, so I have the color model and the resolution of this image changed for ultimately placing it in an environment that's meant to be printed, such as a newsletter. The final thing that I need to do is to save this file. However, I don't want to save it in its current file format, which is JPEG. Reason being is JPEG is a compressed file format, and every time you save an image in JPEG format, it compresses it even further. Compression is a way to keep file sizes small. However, each time an image is compressed, it loses its quality. So repeatedly saving an image over and over and over again in JPEG file format will eventually cause it to be extremely blurry, smudgy, and pixelated. You've probably even seen an image on the internet or tried to print one from the internet that has been overcompressed to that degree. So I'm going to save as in this case. And when I save as, I'm going to go ahead and save it onto my computer here. I'm going to save it into a folder that I know all my images are going to stay organized into. If I want, I can even create a new folder in that location and call it something like newsletter, raster, images, resaved. So that this way here, all of my resaved, changed, and modified images are all ending up in the same place and not scattered in multiple locations on my computer, making it hard for me to find. So I'm going to click Create for that new folder, and I'm going to go ahead and give this a cool name, a file name for this image. Let's see, what should I call it? I think I'd call it something like color splatter. I don't know what to call this thing, but something that will help me recognize what the image is when I see it in my folder, as opposed to me having to open the image just to see what it is. The next really important step is to make sure that the format listed down below is no longer JPEG, but that I am actually saving this image in the best file format for a printed file, which would be TIFF. So I'm going to save this as a TIFF. This is the best file format for saving raster images to be placed in a print file, whether it be InDesign you're placing it into or any other print file. So I'm going to select TIFF, and you'll notice it will automatically change then the extension on the name of my file as I'm saving it. And then the next thing would be to click the button Save. When you save something as a TIFF, you do have an option to compress the size of that image. Honestly, the majority of the images that we use are usually not so large that we would need to compress them in TIFF format. I like to just keep my compression for my TIFF images completely turned off. In other words, set as none. But just note that there are other image compression options for TIFF. I know I want this to print at the highest quality possible in a print document, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep image compression turned off for TIFF. Once you're done setting the image compression option, click OK, and that image is now ready to be placed in a print file. One more thing though before I start also fixing other images here, I'm going to go to the image pull down menu back to mode, and I'm also going to save a grayscale version of this exact same image. It looks a little gory, more like blood splatter. I might not use it, but I am going to go ahead and save it in the grayscale file format so that I can demonstrate later on how you can actually apply spot colors to grayscale TIFFs only, actually in InDesign after they've been placed. So I'm going to do another save as. I know it's already in the correct resolution, has a good name already, but at the end of this name, I'm going to add the word grayscale. This way here, I know that it's the same image as the other one that's in color, only this one is saved in grayscale color model. When I'm done, I'm going to click Save, compression turned off, and then I'm going to go ahead and close this window. So I'm going to be doing this for all of these images that I have open, and I'm going to feel like I'm in a factory here. This is going to go a little bit quicker, but this is something you need to do for all of your images prior to placing them into a print file in InDesign. Moving right along, right? This is happening much faster than initially. So image, mode, CMYK. Isn't this a fun image? Image size. Now this is promising. You'll notice my resolution is almost what I need it to be right now. It only needs to go up a bit, and the width and height of this image are already pretty large. So this means that this image is going to be a lot more useful to me in something like a newsletter that's maybe larger, or 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17. This image is going to be a lot more helpful for me. So I'm going to change the resolution to 266 for this, and notice my image only went down a little bit because it was already a high resolution. I'm going to click OK. Do keep in mind, images that are large width by height in inches and also a higher resolution do have a larger image size. So keep an eye on your image sizes. You don't really want images that are ginormous. As a matter of fact, I'd be willing to say for something like a newsletter, you don't want your images to be over 50 megabytes each. If they are, then you're doing something wrong here, where either the width and height is much bigger than it needs to be or your resolution is too high. I'm also going to save as, if I want to, by the way, I can go ahead and make changes and edits to this image. For instance, if I don't like the way it was cropped and I want to make it a little less crooked for use, I can go ahead and make changes and improvements and updates to these images using my Photoshop tools. I can do things like clone some more dust and colors, or fix an image before I do my final saving. So in this case here, I just kind of rotated it a little bit with my crop tool. CMYK. Image size. Oh, look at this. This is actually a rare case where the resolution is actually higher than I really need it to be, even though the width and the height is a little small. So in the case that you have an image like this, where the resolution is set to 300 and you really only need it 266 and you're lowering the resolution, you will actually increase the width and height proportionately instead of decreasing it like we've seen thus far. So we actually, by lowering the resolution, managed to get an image that was a little bit larger than the one that we found on the internet. So I'm going to click OK. He's a funny guy. This, by the way, has a watermark on it. Ideally, if you find an image on the internet that has a watermark on it, you don't want it to have a watermark on it for the sake of whatever project you're working on for class. In a case like this, probably, I hate to say it, but probably the easiest way to get rid of the watermark in this case is to consider using your clone stamp tool or your spot healing brush tool. It might require a little bit of work, but sometimes it's better than a watermark. So feel free to make changes and edits. You could probably also play around with color if you wanted to do some really wacky wild colors for an image like this. So ooh, this is not looking, whoa, holy mother of pixels. I'm just going to look at the image size here. I am guessing there's no way on earth. Yeah, there's no way on earth. If I increase the resolution to the proper resolution, I have an image that's like 2 by 1. That's just going to be too small for me to use, so I'm just going to close that image. Oh, look, it's going to be our employee of the month. Oh, employee of the month. I don't know who this dude is. I'm going to give him a name. What should we call him? We should call him Bob. That's my next door neighbor's name, Bob. So Bob. So by the way, this is in CMYK, but the original image was in grayscale. So I have the option. If I keep it in CMYK, it's going to use cyan, magenta, yellow, and black to print this image when you go to print. Otherwise, my option is to just save it in grayscale if I don't need to use all 4 colors to print this image. So you know what? I'm going to save this one intentionally just as grayscale, and then I'm going to do a save as TIFF. So this is going to be Bob, and then he is the employee of the month. Oh, this is a PNG too. No PNGs for print, you guys. PNGs, JPEGs, GIF or GIF, depending on how you like to pronounce it. None of those really should be ever placed in a print document. The software will let you place it there, but you shouldn't. I'm going to go ahead and make sure the format here is correct as a TIFF. As I'm saving it, and I don't know why, but apparently it has layers too. So I'm going to uncheck layers because I don't need layers. And really, all of your raster images that have layers ought to be flattened or save as flattened, meaning no layers, before you place them into any desktop publishing or page layout software like InDesign. So I made sure layers was turned off because I saw it was selected, meaning there must have been layers somewhere in there. And now I'm going to go ahead and click Save and click OK. All right, so many different images, right? I have a folder here on my laptop that has all of these images been resaved as TIFF, renamed as something that I can see and recognize. They all have had their color models changed so that I can use them in a print document, and they all have a resolution high enough for print. So now that I have all these done, the next step would be to go through any vector files I have to vet those and make sure those are ready for placement in my InDesign file. But that's going to be a separate presentation.